6 months earlier, before the rain, before the grave, and before the endless nights of sorrow, Lyra's life had been very different. Her home was filled with laughter instead of silence. Every morning began with the sound of small feet running across the floor. Every room seemed brighter because of one little boy. Aron was only 6 years old, but his energy could fill an entire house. He was curious about everything around him. He asked hundreds of questions every day, and somehow he always found new adventures. On the morning that changed everything, the sky above Varelia was bright and clear. The city was preparing for its annual Star Market Festival, one of the largest events on the planet. Visitors from different regions traveled to the city to enjoy food, games, music, and rare items from across the galaxy. Colorful lights decorated every street, and large banners hung from the buildings. The atmosphere was full of excitement. For most families, it was a day of celebration. For Lyra, it seemed like the perfect chance to spend time with her son. Aron could hardly contain his excitement as they entered the crowded market. His large blue eyes moved from one attraction to another. Every few steps, he pointed at something new and asked a question. Sometimes it was a strange machine, sometimes it was an unusual animal. Other times it was a toy floating inside a display case. Lyra laughed as she tried to keep up with him. She held his small hand tightly and reminded him not to wander away. Aron promised he would stay close, but his excitement made it difficult for him to stand still. As they moved through the festival, they stopped at several stalls. Aron won a small glowing crystal during a game and proudly carried it in his pocket. He tasted sweet festival cakes and watched performers create beautiful shapes of light in the air. Everywhere he looked, something amazing caught his attention. For a while, Lyra forgot about her daily worries. Watching her son smile made everything else seem unimportant. It was one of the happiest days they had shared in months. Hours passed quickly. The market became even more crowded as evening approached. Thousands of visitors filled the streets. Music echoed between the buildings, and bright lights illuminated the sky. Lyra and Aron stopped near a large fountain at the center of the festival. While Aron sat on the edge of the fountain eating a snack, Lyra stepped only a few feet away to buy drinks from a nearby stand. It seemed like a harmless decision. She could still see him clearly from where she stood. The vendor handed her the drinks. Lyra turned around immediately, ready to return to her son, but the moment her eyes searched for him, her heart froze. The spot where Aron had been sitting was empty. At first, she thought he had simply moved a few steps away. She looked around the fountain and called his name. There was no answer. She searched the nearby crowd, expecting to see his familiar face. Instead, she saw only strangers moving in every direction. Her stomach tightened. She called his name again, louder this time. Still nothing. Within minutes, panic began to spread through her entire body. She rushed through the crowd, searching every corner of the plaza. She checked nearby stalls, game booths, and rest areas. She asked workers if they had seen a young boy. Most shook their heads. A few thought they had seen someone similar, but none of the answers led anywhere. Every passing minute made her fear grow stronger. Security teams quickly joined the search. Announcements echoed through the festival speakers. Visitors were asked to report any information. Surveillance systems reviewed hours of recordings. Search drones filled the sky. Yet somehow Aron had vanished without leaving a clear trace behind. It was as if he had simply disappeared into thin air. The search continued through the entire night. By morning, hundreds of volunteers had joined. The story spread across the planet faster than anyone expected. News channels interrupted regular programs to report the missing child. Citizens organized search groups and traveled to nearby regions looking for clues. The entire world seemed united by one goal: finding Aron. Days passed, but no answers came. Then, 2 weeks later, investigators discovered something unusual deep inside a remote forest far from the city. Hidden between large trees was the wreckage of a small transport shuttle. The craft was heavily damaged, and much of it had been destroyed by impact and weather. Search teams carefully examined every part of the wreckage. The discovery immediately became the center of attention. When authorities informed Lyra about the shuttle, she rushed to the site hoping for answers. Instead, she found only more questions. There were signs that someone had been inside the craft, but there was no clear evidence of what had happened afterward. Investigators worked for days trying to understand the mystery. Unfortunately, every lead ended in uncertainty. Then came the announcement that shattered Lyra's world. The authorities officially declared that Aaron was most likely dead. The words felt unreal. Lyra refused to believe them. She argued with investigators, demanded more searches, and begged officials not to stop looking. But as weeks turned into months, resources began to disappear. Volunteers slowly returned to their normal lives. News stations moved on to other stories. The search ended. Hope faded. And eventually, a small grave appeared on a lonely hill outside the city. But what nobody on Veralia knew was that far beyond their world, among the distant stars, a human named Ethan had already found something inside a damaged escape pod that would change everything. 6 months before the rainy nights at the graveyard, Lyra's life was full of happiness and hope. Her small home near the edge of Veralia City was always filled with laughter, and every day felt brighter because of her young son, Aaron. He was only 6 years old, but he had enough energy to keep everyone around him smiling. From sunrise until bedtime, he asked endless questions about the stars, the planets, and the strange creatures that lived across the galaxy. His curious mind and cheerful spirit made him the center of Lyra's world, and she loved every moment she spent with him. The annual Star Market Festival was finally arriving, and the entire city was excited about the celebration. It was the biggest event of the year, attracting visitors from every corner of the planet. Bright banners covered the streets, colorful lights decorated every building, and music echoed through the air from morning until night. Aaron had been talking about the festival for weeks, counting down the days until it finally arrived. On the morning of the event, he woke up before sunrise and rushed into Lyra's room, unable to contain his excitement about the adventures waiting for them in the city. As they entered the festival grounds, Aaron's eyes widened with amazement. Everywhere he looked, something new caught his attention. Giant floating decorations drifted above the streets, performers created glowing shapes from pure energy, and vendors displayed rare items brought from distant star systems. Every few steps, Aaron would stop to stare at something fascinating and ask another question. Lyra laughed as she followed him through the crowded streets, holding his hand tightly while trying to keep up with his endless curiosity. Watching him enjoy the festival made her happier than anything else in the world. For several hours, everything was perfect. Aaron played games, won a glowing crystal prize, and sampled every sweet snack he could find. He laughed with other children, watched street performers, and proudly showed Lyra every treasure he collected throughout the day. The festival became even more beautiful as evening approached and thousands of colorful lights illuminated the city. Looking around at the joyful crowd, Lyra felt grateful for the peaceful life they shared. She never imagined that this ordinary day would soon become the worst day of her life. As the sun began to set, Lyra and Aaron stopped near a large fountain in the center of the festival. The fountain was surrounded by families resting after a long day of celebration. Aaron sat on the stone edge while holding his favorite glowing crystal in his hands. A nearby vendor was selling drinks, and Lyra decided to buy 2 cold fruit beverages before continuing their evening. The stand was only a short distance away, and she could clearly see Aaron from where she stood. It seemed completely safe, and she expected to return to him within moments. The vendor handed her the drinks, and Lyra immediately turned around with a smile on her face. However, the smile vanished instantly. The place where Aaron had been sitting was empty. At first, she thought he had simply moved a few steps away to look at something interesting. She scanned the nearby area calmly and called his name. When there was no answer, she looked more carefully through the crowd. Her heartbeat began to quicken as she searched every direction, but she could not find him anywhere among the hundreds of people moving through the plaza. Within minutes, calm concern turned into panic. Lyra rushed around the fountain, calling Aaron's name louder each time. She searched nearby shops, game stalls, and walkways, hoping he had wandered off by accident. Every second felt longer than the last. People stopped to help when they saw her distress, and several festival workers joined the search immediately. Despite everyone's efforts, no one could find any sign of the missing child. It was as though he had vanished from the crowded festival without leaving a single trace behind. Security officers quickly arrived and began organizing a larger search operation. Announcements echoed from speakers across the city, asking visitors to report any information about the missing boy. Surveillance teams reviewed countless hours of recordings while drones scanned the streets from above. As darkness covered the city, hundreds of volunteers joined the effort. Entire neighborhoods worked together to search every possible location. The story spread rapidly through local news channels, and soon the entire planet knew about the missing child named Aaron. Days passed, but the search produced no answers. Rescue teams searched forests, rivers, caves, abandoned buildings, and remote settlements. Volunteers traveled across vast regions hoping to discover some clue that might lead them to the missing boy. Lyra barely slept during those days. She spent every waking hour helping search teams and following every possible lead. Whenever someone reported seeing a child matching Aaron's description, she rushed to investigate, only to face disappointment again and again. Still, she refused to lose hope because she believed her son was alive somewhere. 2 weeks later, investigators made a discovery that shocked the entire planet. Deep inside a remote forest far from the city, search teams found the wreckage of a small transport shuttle hidden among dense trees. The damaged craft appeared to have crashed long before it was discovered. Parts of the shuttle were badly destroyed, making it difficult to understand exactly what had happened. The discovery immediately became the focus of the investigation, and experts worked day and night trying to uncover the truth hidden within the wreckage. Lyra rushed to the crash site the moment she heard the news. Her heart was filled with both fear and hope as she watched investigators examine the destroyed shuttle. She desperately wanted answers, but the wreckage raised more questions than it solved. There were signs that someone had been inside the craft, yet no clear evidence explained where that person had gone. Days of investigation followed, but every clue seemed to lead nowhere. The mystery only grew deeper, and uncertainty continued to surround Aaron's disappearance. Eventually, the authorities reached a conclusion that shattered Lyra's heart. After reviewing all available evidence, they announced that Aaron was most likely dead. The statement spread across the planet and marked the official end of the search operation. Volunteers returned home, news channels moved on to other stories, and life slowly continued for everyone else. For Lyra, however, life stopped completely. She refused to accept the conclusion, but no matter how hard she fought, the search was over and hope seemed lost. What nobody on Varelia knew was that far beyond their planet, deep among the distant stars, another story was unfolding. A human named Ethan had discovered something hidden inside a damaged escape pod. That discovery would eventually change everything and prove that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. While the people of Varelia slowly accepted that Aaron was gone forever, a completely different story was unfolding far beyond their world. Millions of miles from the nearest planet, a small human cargo ship drifted through a lonely region of space known for abandoned wrecks and dangerous debris fields. Most captains avoided the area because it was filled with broken ships, floating metal, and hidden dangers. However, Ethan Walker was not like most captains. He had spent years working as a salvage pilot, recovering damaged vessels and valuable cargo from forgotten corners of the galaxy. The cargo ship Aurora Dawn moved carefully between giant pieces of floating wreckage. Inside the cockpit, Ethan studied his scanners while drinking a cup of cold coffee that he had forgotten to finish hours earlier. The mission had been quiet so far, and he expected another routine day of searching abandoned wrecks. Most salvage jobs were boring. Occasionally he would find useful equipment or rare materials, but nothing truly exciting ever happened. That was exactly what Ethan expected when his scanner suddenly detected a weak emergency signal hidden beneath layers of interference. At first, Ethan assumed the signal came from an old navigation beacon. The area was full of broken equipment still sending automatic distress messages long after their owners had disappeared. Still, something about this signal seemed unusual. It was weak, unstable, and constantly fading in and out. Curious, Ethan adjusted his scanner and followed the source deeper into the debris field. The signal grew slightly stronger as he approached, confirming that something was still transmitting nearby. Several minutes later, Ethan spotted the source. A small escape pod floated silently between two large sections of wreckage. The pod was badly damaged and covered with burn marks from what looked like a severe accident. One side of the pod had been crushed inward, and several external systems were completely destroyed. Under normal circumstances, nobody could have survived inside such a damaged vessel. Ethan stared at the pod through the cockpit window and assumed he was looking at another tragic reminder of space's dangers. Despite his expectations, something made him investigate further. He guided the Aurora Dawn closer and carefully attached the pod to his ship using magnetic clamps. Once the pod was secured, he moved it into the cargo bay for inspection. The damaged vessel looked even worse up close. Several life support systems had failed completely, and the emergency battery was almost empty. The fact that the distress beacon was still functioning at all seemed like a miracle. Ethan prepared himself for what he expected to find inside. When the pod finally opened, Ethan froze. Lying inside was a small alien child. The boy looked weak and pale, barely moving beneath a damaged emergency blanket. Thin medical tubes surrounded him, many of them no longer functioning properly. The life support display showed critical warnings flashing across the screen. The child's breathing was shallow and his heartbeat appeared dangerously unstable. Ethan immediately realized that the boy was still alive, but only barely. If the pod had remained undiscovered for a few more hours, it would likely have become his tomb. Without hesitation, Ethan carried the child to the ship's medical room. He activated every emergency treatment system available and contacted a nearby medical station for advice. The doctors who reviewed the scans were deeply concerned. They explained that the child had suffered severe injuries, dehydration, and long-term exposure to failing life support systems. His chances of survival were extremely low. Even with immediate treatment, there was no guarantee he would live through the next few days. Most people would have accepted the situation and prepared for the worst. Ethan refused. For the next several weeks, he dedicated himself entirely to keeping the child alive. He delayed profitable jobs, ignored business opportunities, and spent nearly all of his savings on specialized medical treatment. Every day he monitored the boy's condition, adjusted equipment, and followed doctors' instructions. Some nights he slept beside the medical pod because he feared something might go wrong while he was resting. The child remained unconscious, showing little sign of improvement, but Ethan continued fighting for him anyway. Months passed slowly. More than once, doctors advised Ethan not to expect a miracle. They warned him that the child's condition remained extremely serious. Yet every time someone suggested giving up hope, Ethan responded with the same answer. He believed that as long as the boy was breathing, there was still a chance. He refused to let the child face the darkness alone. Somewhere out there, Ethan often thought, there had to be a family waiting for him. One quiet evening, Ethan sat beside the medical pod reviewing the latest health reports. The numbers looked slightly better than before, but progress remained slow. Exhausted from another long day, he leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. Suddenly, he heard a faint sound coming from the pod. His eyes snapped open immediately. The boy's fingers had moved. Ethan jumped to his feet and rushed to the bedside. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the small hand moved again. It was only a tiny movement, but it was enough to make Ethan's heart race. He quickly contacted the medical station and explained what he had seen. Doctors instructed him to continue monitoring the child while they reviewed the data. Hours later, one of the doctors contacted Ethan with surprising news. "The brain activity is improving," the doctor said. "For the first time, we are seeing real signs of recovery." Ethan smiled for the first time in weeks. Then, late that night, as stars drifted silently beyond the ship's windows, something incredible happened. The boy slowly opened his eyes. Far away on Varelia, Lyra sat alone in her dark house, believing her son was gone forever. She had no idea that across the stars, her child had just begun the journey back home. When Aaron opened his eyes, everything around him felt strange and unfamiliar. Soft white lights glowed above his bed, and a quiet humming sound echoed through the room. For a few moments, he simply stared at the ceiling, trying to understand where he was. His body felt weak, and even lifting his head required effort. He could not remember how he had arrived there, or why he was lying inside a medical room. Fear slowly began to grow inside him, because nothing looked familiar, and there was no sign of anyone he recognized. As Aaron looked around the room, he noticed someone sitting nearby. The figure immediately stood up after seeing that the child was awake. For a brief moment, panic flashed across Aaron's face because he had never seen a human before. Ethan quickly noticed the fear in the boy's eyes and kept a safe distance. He spoke calmly and introduced himself in a friendly voice. Instead of asking questions right away, he simply explained that Aaron was safe and that nobody would hurt him. The gentle tone helped the frightened child relax, although confusion still filled his mind. During the next few days, Aaron slowly recovered his strength. The ship's medical systems helped his body heal, and every morning he felt slightly better than the day before. Ethan stayed with him whenever possible, bringing food, telling stories, and answering simple questions. Although they came from completely different worlds, a bond slowly began to form between them. Aaron no longer felt afraid whenever Ethan entered the room. In fact, he started looking forward to their conversations, because they helped distract him from the fear and uncertainty surrounding his situation. One evening, while they were eating together inside the ship's small dining area, Ethan carefully asked whether Aaron remembered anything about his past. At first, the child simply shook his head because most of his memories felt distant and broken. However, after thinking for a few moments, a few images slowly returned to him. He remembered a bright home filled with warm light. He remembered running through a beautiful garden surrounded by colorful flowers. Most importantly, he remembered a smiling woman who always held his hand whenever they walked through busy places. The memory felt stronger than all the others. Aaron could clearly picture her silver hair shining beneath the sunlight and her gentle smile whenever she looked at him. As the image became clearer, sadness filled his eyes. He lowered his head and held back tears while trying to describe her to Ethan. The human listened carefully, without interrupting, because he understood how important these memories were. Every small detail could help uncover the mystery of where Aaron came from and how he had ended up drifting alone through space. As the conversation continued, more memories slowly returned. Aaron remembered playing with a small blue toy animal before going to sleep. He remembered sitting on his mother's shoulders during celebrations. He remembered hearing music, seeing colorful lights, and standing among large crowds during a festival. The memories were still incomplete, but they provided valuable clues. For the first time since finding the child, Ethan felt confident that there was a real chance of locating his family. Somewhere in the galaxy, a mother was probably still thinking about her missing son every single day. That night, after Aaron had gone to sleep, Ethan returned to the cockpit and began searching through galactic records. Thousands of missing person reports appeared on his screen. He spent hours comparing descriptions, dates, and locations while trying to find a match. The process was slow and frustrating because many reports contained incomplete information. Several possible matches turned out to be wrong. Days became weeks as Ethan continued his search, refusing to give up despite the lack of progress. Every time he looked at Aaron, he reminded himself why the effort was worth it. One late evening, while reviewing another group of records, Ethan suddenly froze. A report from a planet called Verelia appeared on the screen. The description matched Aaron almost perfectly. The age was correct. The physical features matched. Even the date of disappearance aligned with the estimated time the child had spent inside the damaged escape pod. Ethan carefully reread the report several times because he could hardly believe what he was seeing. After months of searching, he had finally found the answer he had been looking for. However, the excitement disappeared when he continued reading the report. According to official records, the search operation for Aaron had ended months earlier. Authorities had concluded that the child could not have survived. The report mentioned a memorial ceremony and confirmed that a grave had been created in his honor. Ethan stared at the screen in silence. He imagined the pain his mother must have experienced after being told that her son was gone forever. The thought weighed heavily on his heart because no parent deserved to suffer such a loss. The next morning, Ethan shared the news with Aaron. At first, the child could hardly believe it. Learning that his homeworld had been found filled him with excitement. But hearing that everyone believed he was dead brought sadness as well. He thought about his mother and wondered how much she had cried during the months they had been apart. The idea that she might have lost hope completely hurt him more than anything else. For several minutes, neither of them spoke because both were thinking about the reunion that now seemed possible. Ethan eventually placed a reassuring hand on Aaron's shoulder and promised that they would reach Verelia soon. He explained that the journey would take time, but he would not stop until the child was safely home. Aaron nodded and smiled for the first time in many weeks. The possibility of seeing his mother again filled him with hope. For the first time since waking up aboard the Aurora Dawn, the future no longer seemed uncertain. Instead, it felt bright and full of possibilities. Over the following days, the ship was prepared for the long trip to Varelia. Supplies were loaded, navigation systems were updated, and every important system was carefully inspected. Ethan wanted to ensure that nothing would prevent them from reaching their destination. As the massive engines powered up and the stars stretched across the cockpit window, Aaron stood quietly beside Ethan. Somewhere beyond the endless darkness was the world he called home, and the mother who still loved him. Neither of them realized that trouble was already waiting ahead. Far beyond the nearest trade route, hidden among a field of drifting asteroids, another ship had detected the Aurora Dawn. Its captain watched Ethan's vessel through long-range scanners and smiled. The mysterious ship immediately changed course and began following them through space. While Aaron dreamed of returning home, danger was slowly moving closer with every passing hour. The journey to Varelia was about to become far more difficult than either of them expected. The Aurora Dawn moved steadily through the endless darkness of space, carrying Ethan and Aaron closer to Varelia with every passing day. Inside the ship, the atmosphere felt lighter than it had in months. Aaron spent much of his time looking through the observation windows, watching distant stars shine against the black sky. Every new day brought him closer to home, and the thought of seeing his mother again filled him with excitement. Although he still struggled to remember everything about his past, one thing remained clear in his heart. He wanted nothing more than to be reunited with the woman who had never stopped loving him. Ethan was happy to see the child smiling again, but he could not completely relax. Years of traveling through dangerous regions of space had taught him to trust his instincts. Something felt wrong. Several times during routine scanner checks, he noticed unusual readings appearing briefly before disappearing again. At first, he assumed the signals were caused by nearby asteroids or natural interference. However, the strange readings continued to appear. Each time, they seemed slightly closer than before. The pattern made Ethan uneasy, and he began monitoring the ship's sensors more carefully. One evening, while Aaron was asleep in his cabin, Ethan sat alone in the cockpit studying the latest scanner reports. His eyes moved across the display screens as he compared data collected over the previous week. Suddenly, he noticed something that made his stomach tighten. A faint energy signature had appeared multiple times along their travel route. The signature was too consistent to be random interference. Someone, or something, was following them. Ethan immediately ran additional scans, but the unknown signal disappeared once again before he could identify its source. The next morning, Ethan decided not to alarm Aaron. The child had already endured enough fear and uncertainty. Instead, Ethan quietly increased the ship's security settings and reviewed emergency procedures. He checked the engines, inspected communication systems, and prepared several backup navigation routes. If trouble appeared, he wanted to be ready. Although he hoped his concerns were unnecessary, experience told him otherwise. Space was full of people willing to attack vulnerable ships for profit, and the Aurora Dawn looked like an easy target from a distance. For the next 2 days, nothing unusual happened. The ship continued its journey peacefully, and Ethan began wondering whether he had overreacted. Then, late one night, an alarm suddenly echoed through the vessel. Red warning lights flashed across the cockpit, instantly breaking the silence. Ethan rushed to the controls and activated the scanner display. His heart sank when several unidentified ships appeared on the screen. They had been hiding within a nearby asteroid field and were now moving directly toward the Aurora Dawn at high speed. Aaron quickly entered the cockpit after hearing the alarm. Fear appeared on his face as he looked at the flashing warning lights. Ethan remained calm and explained the situation as clearly as possible. The approaching vessels were not responding to communication requests, which usually meant trouble. Most likely they were pirates searching for valuable cargo. Ethan instructed Aaron to remain inside a secure compartment while he handled the situation. Although the child wanted to help, he could see the seriousness in Ethan's expression and agreed without argument. Within minutes, the pirate ship surrounded the Aurora Dawn. A message finally appeared on the communication screen. The face of a rough-looking alien captain filled the display. His cold smile immediately revealed that peaceful negotiation was unlikely. He demanded that Ethan surrender all cargo and prepare for inspection. The pirate captain claimed that resistance would only make things worse. Ethan listened carefully, but refused to reveal anything about Aaron. To the pirates, the child was just another piece of cargo. To Ethan, he was a life worth protecting. The pirate ships moved closer. Warning shots flashed past the Aurora Dawn, shaking the vessel violently. Alarms continued to sound as Ethan guided the ship through the surrounding asteroids. Massive rocks drifted through space in every direction, creating a dangerous maze. The pirates pursued aggressively, confident that their superior numbers guaranteed victory. However, Ethan knew the asteroid field offered one advantage. He had spent years navigating dangerous environments. While his pursuers relied mostly on force and intimidation, the chase quickly became intense. Ethan maneuvered between giant asteroids with incredible precision. Several pirate ships struggled to follow the same path. One vessel clipped an asteroid and spun out of control. Another was forced to slow down to avoid a collision. Despite these setbacks, the pirates continued their pursuit. The Aurora Dawn shook repeatedly as debris struck its outer hull. Warning systems reported minor damage across several sections of the ship. Every passing minute increased the danger. Meanwhile, Aaron waited inside the secure compartment, listening to the sounds of the battle unfolding around him. Fear filled his chest, but he remembered everything Ethan had done for him over the past months. The human had rescued him, protected him, and promised to bring him home. Aaron realized that Ethan was risking his own life to keep that promise. For the first time, the child truly understood how much the human cared about him. After nearly an hour of dangerous maneuvering, Ethan managed to escape the asteroid field. The pirate ships remained behind, unable to keep up with the Aurora Dawn's sudden burst of speed. For the moment, they were safe. However, the victory came at a cost. Several systems had been damaged during the chase, including part of the long-range communication array. Repairs would take time, and the journey to Veralia would now be slower than planned. As the ship continued through space, Ethan stared at the navigation display. They were still several days away from Veralia. The pirate attack had delayed them, but his determination remained unchanged. No matter how many obstacles appeared, he would keep moving forward. Far away on Veralia, Lyra sat alone beside Aaron's grave once again. She looked at the rain falling from the sky and wondered if she would ever feel happiness again. She had no idea that her son was alive, nor did she know that he was fighting every obstacle in the galaxy just to return home to her. The distance between them was shrinking, and destiny was bringing them closer with every passing hour.